Now, there's been a mad dash to book flights abroad after the government's announcement yesterday that double-vaccinated sun-seekers won't have to isolate after returning from amber-list countries.
But with travellers still needing to pay for PCR tests before and after their return, many families, in particular, because they have to do multiple tests, are concerned about the cost. Now, joining us now is the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. We've got so much to talk to you about this morning, but I can't start without saying, where are you watching the match on Sunday, Grant?
I watched most of them in my local, so I'm probably headed back there. Still haven't quite made arrangements for it, though.
Now, Grant, you're... I don't want to drop you in it here, but you're one of the few members of the Cabinet who occasionally returns my phone calls and emails. Most of them don't want to have anything to do with me. So if you're talking to the rest of them, will you tell them that if they're going to post pictures of themselves in England shirts, can they not put them over their working clothes? Because that is an offence to humanity and any football fan. Can you do that for me?
I would do that, and I'll bear it in mind myself as well for Sunday.
Yeah, you're going to do that. But listen, there is a serious point here. I've got a piece in the I paper today about why people are so madly in love with Gareth Southgate and this team. I do think there is an element of them being the public feeling they're a bit of an antithesis to what we're seeing from politics at the moment. A lot of dishonesty, not very much openness, not very much integrity and accountability. And we saw that again yesterday with Boris Johnson's holiday and yet another thing that he seems to think he can get away with. And there we see now somebody like Gareth Southgate, who is incredibly open, incredibly humble, incredibly honest, under-promises and over-delivers, respects his opponents. Rather than kind of jumping on the bandwagon, couldn't you guys maybe learn something from the way that he conducts himself?
I'm not sure there are dozens of crossover lessons, but, I mean, look, the football is amazing. It's certainly giving the whole nation a lift, and everyone appreciates, the way that Gareth Southgate's managed the team, and it's kind of interesting to see, from that his experience all those years ago, 25 years ago, to today, how he has, become a manager who's been able to do something that no manager's done with the England team for such a long time and get us into
Earlier on, though, we were talking about this, and Alistair, you were saying it too, maybe that's what you're going to say, I'm sorry if I interrupted you, that what people like about Gareth Southgate is there's a clarity of message. He doesn't over-promise. He's not going around saying, we're definitely going to win this, I've got it covered, don't worry. It's very, very clear, and work's gone in behind the scenes, and that is what so many people feel hasn't been happening with the government. And indeed, there's still confusion, even though there was a lot of positivity about the freeing up of the 100 or more countries that people can now travel to in that way. There's still confusion over lots of things. If you're an expat returning home and you haven't had your jab on the NHS, then you're not part of that scheme, are you? Because you've had your jab abroad and you can't, or your jabs abroad and you can't come back. There's problems with test and trace, the cost of it, of getting those tests done, and also the system already at breaking point. It's still not clear how easy it's going to be to travel this summer.
Yeah, well, let me try and give you completely upfront answers, in which case. I mean, first of all, you're right, this is phase one. We're able to now say that people who have been vaccinated in the UK will be able to return even if they've gone to an amber country where they would have had to quarantine coming back previously from the 19th of July, I should say. And that's because we've got the NHS app, which can show somebody's vaccinated status, or they can call 119 and get a paper version of it. So that's something that we're able to do administratively and put together with the passenger locator form, which is the form that everybody has to fill in if they're coming to this country. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you're right, that there is additional effort and hassle involved in travel that didn't exist back in 2019 before this virus. We needed to do that to keep the country safe. The cost of those tests, we said we would work with the testing sector to get them down. They have been coming down. There are now over 400 providers, and some of them, I think there are about 30 tests which come in at less than £30.
I've managed to get away once the French said that you could go with 2 double jab. I went there, I got PCR in France, the cost was £0. I came back, and between myself and Fiona, I think we were up to about 700 quid. somebody is raking it in on these tests? And also, why can't we do the lateral flow and then have the PCR test, which is much more expensive, if that proves positive? Why do we have to have these PCR tests?
So look, first of all, on both those points, the French have taken the decision to do them for free. We provide free testing for everybody in the UK. Indeed, actually, unlike any other country, I think, twice a week testing available to everybody through lateral flow. We've taken the view that when somebody's travelling, we don't want to put that pressure on the NHS. It's usually a discretionary activity, so people are buying those tests. But it is the case that the tests have fallen. So since you had to spend £700, you can now go on gov.uk and find a government recommended private provider, and they've come down to, in many cases, I mean, I don't want to, as soon as you quote a price, people say, well, that comes with terms and conditions. So I won't do that, but you'll see they start from a few pounds on that
but hang on, you say you're providing the lateral flow tests up to twice a week, but they're not the ones that you expect for travel, because you're concerned about how good they are. So you're providing the ones that you're not confident of for free, but there's still a cost on the ones that actually you demand.
It's not quite that way. Because the PCR tests are the ones which can be sequenced for the genome, that means we can find variants in them. We're particularly interested when people have travelled from abroad and come here, that they're not bringing back a variant of concern, and the PCR test is able to instantly look at that on a positive test. So that's the reason why we're focused on PCR tests for people who travel rather than the lateral flow tests.
OK, it seems, there's certainly a rumour, and it's been reported in the paper, that Tory MPs have got their own way to get round this. They're disabling their NHS COVID-19 apps, going into self-imposed quarantine before their holidays to avoid being told to self-isolate. Apparently, there's a slogan being banded around the Commons at the moment, which is, stay home, protect the holiday, save your marriage. Are you disabling your NHS app, and do you know of others that are?
I'm certainly not. I've not heard about that at all, and certainly
you need to get out into the Commons more.
Apparently so, yeah, but it seems so. But look, I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that. The COVID app is a part of the many different tools in our armory, vaccinations being obviously a very big one, to try to deal with this pandemic. And, we all need to do the responsible thing with it. And by having the app, it's one more way to know that you may have been exposed to...
So if a Tory MP, or indeed any MP, was disabling that app and doing this, what view would you take of it?
Well, just keep the app on the phone. I mean, we all know after a year and a half of dealing with this virus, we've become increasingly knowledgeable about it. Things like, it's better to be outside than indoors and all the rest of it. It's better to have the app on than not, because you want to know if you've been near somebody who has received...
It would be wrong for them to do that.
So it would be wrong to do that? Yeah. Grant, can I just briefly go to another one? There's a letter I saw in The Independent this morning from a gentleman named Richard Elliott in Buckinghamshire. Now that Freedom Day is within sight following the government's transfer of responsibility for COVID to the people, distractions of day-to-day management of the situation will be removed from ministers involved. There can therefore be no objection to starting the public inquiry of the handling of the COVID situation, which the government has so skillfully avoided to date. So now that we are moving to this more normal phase, rather than tell us it will happen sometime in the future, can you give us an indication as to when there will be a proper, full, independent inquiry to what happened, particularly in the early stages of the management of this pandemic?
Well, first of all, I should say, we are experiencing a third wave. It's certainly not over by any means. Some huge amounts of my time involved as a minister in dealing with it. Secondly, the Prime Minister's already announced we're going to have a full, open and independent... Yeah, he's been announced it many
times. Is there any indication as to when? You're not going to do it before an election, are you?
No. First of all, we want to get it done as quickly as possible. But secondly, it seems to me that whilst we're experiencing a third wave and the pandemic's by no means over, that isn't the right moment to do it, because you want to do it being able to look back on the issue as a whole rather than sort of jump into it. But we don't want to drag it out. We do want to do it well before the next election.
You'll do it before the next election? You'll do it before the next election?
Sure.
OK.
Yeah,
and one very final point, if I may, about
the
very final question about the football, if I may. I've been involved in lots of receptions and visits to Downing Street when I used to work there, and I know there's lots of discussion goes on. And obviously, if England win, I suspect there'll be a reception at the Palace, there'll be a reception at number 10. Can I assume that if any of the England players felt they wanted to take the knee, which some of your ministers have described as a gesture politics and Marxist, that they would be entitled to do that? Because that would be a very powerful signal.
But I've always thought, you know, we should all support the England team, and I look forward to them doing that. I don't want to kind of jinx it by what happens next afterwards. You're already on to the receptions. Let's win the game first of all. Let's win the match first of all. And I've always been very relaxed about the rest of it. I mean, no one wants racism in football or any part of society, and how people choose to make that clear is their business entirely.
OK, I take that as if the players are watching, I think they have permission to take the knee in Downing Street.
Maybe they could invite them just for getting to the finals, and then they could do it then.
Well, look, as I say, let's win this match, first of all, guys. I think we just not get ahead of ourselves here. Looking forward to Sunday.
Well, thank you.
We don't want to jinx anything, you're right. Good to talk to you this morning.